Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher, CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and this is yet another of our series of webinars where we do our best to really respond to the challenges and needs that you have in your business. And we do that by bringing some great experts, and we talk about some really important subjects. And today we're going to be talking about employee engagement, which is everything from boosting morale and how that impacts productivity and all of the above. And we know that everybody, all of you watching, certainly deal with that. Now, before we get into this and before I introduce my guests, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here and mention, of course, that we always want to thank right out of the gates here, Synchrony. They are our sponsor of all of our educational outlets here at HFA. And by the way, for those of you that take part in the Synchrony Ignite program, at the end of this webinar, we will have a special code for you so you can get some points and credits for being a part of this. I also want to mention, of course, that really, I think the best library in our industry, if not in all of retail, for just everything that you need to really help you run your business is myhfa.org/webinar. Our entire catalog is there on demand. You can use them for your meetings with your teams, whatever it might be. If you want to watch these again, please do. So I just want to make mention that that is there as well. Also, and finally, at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a bunch of little buttons down there. There's a Q&A. Ignore the chat one. The Q&A is where you can, if you'd like, send in some questions. We did get a bunch of questions in advance, but if you have questions during this particular webinar, go ahead and put it in there. We'll do our best to get to that right away. All right. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel today. And as usual, we have a really, really great panel that we brought together here. We have Sarah Luther joining us. She's the Director of Talent and Employee Experience at Home Trends. Sarah, you've been with us before. We thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. We also have Susie Brummel. She is a sales recruiter at Crowley Furniture and Mattress. And Susie, also appreciate having you here as well. And Renee Johnson is joining us, and Renee is with Employee Engagement Solutions. They're all about improving culture, retention, all these things that morale and everything we're talking about really, just all sort of filters through. So all three of you, thanks for joining us. Appreciate this today. We've got a lot to talk about, and I think it's the tough part of this webinar is that we talk about morale. That is something, in employee engagement. I mean, those are terms we've all heard, but man, they can be defined about 1,000 different ways. So I would just like to just initially from the three of you get an idea about, what do you think those 2 or 3 key elements are of employee engagement when it comes to things like building morale and making sure the team is all, really kind of on the same page, if you will. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? What would you say those 2 or 3 things are?
Oh man. First and foremost, understanding what job or what you're responsible for, your expectations and your role, and what you're doing to impact the company. Understanding too, I guess the second part would be to understand really what the vision and the mission is of the company. In our organization, our mission is to serve 500,000 families. And so making sure that everybody knows that ultimately that's what we're to serve families and have an exceptional impact on people. So that's something that you just can't let, not be trained and not be up in the employees' eyes and education every single day on the job.
I want to dig down a little bit more on that in just a second, but let me continue around the squares here. Susie, what do you think are those 2 or 3 things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the understanding your role in the company is really important, but to me, just knowing that you have support is really what's there, and being able to be supported by the entire organization, the leadership, but also your colleagues, and encouraging the support between colleagues is really important to people wanting to come to your company and wanting to be there.
Okay. Renee, what do you think?
Well, I would echo both of the panelists' comments and just add that I think we can't do a lot of work in fine-tuning our levels of employee engagement unless we've done the work to really build a strong organizational culture. And then, of course, the strong engagement helps continue supporting the strong organizational culture. And in addition to expectations and the support, say, dialing into really knowing your employees, empowering your employees, and then offering really, as Susie mentioned, that ongoing consistent coaching and support.
This is I mean, you were off to a great start because there's a lot to unpack even with just you guys talked about there. Sarah, let me ask you this. When you talked about understanding your role and vision and mission, I get the feeling that if I'm kind of reading between the lines on that I know that it's difficult, and I've seen this in work environments myself, people I've worked with, worked for, et cetera, that when there's not the delineation to really understand your role, you're kind of meandering all over the place. And when that's happening, there's a bit of, to me, it speaks of disconnect and things like that. So am I reading that correctly? And is that why it's important? Because is it that if you make sure that your team understands their individual role, then satisfaction, meeting expectations all can come from that, right? Am I reading that correctly?
I think so. I think, really what it comes down to is what are your key measurable accountabilities in your specific position. Every position should have those. And that's how we can determine whether or not that person is providing engagement or not. Are they there to impact the bottom line with our customer service? So, ultimately our customers are the heart of our business as well as our employees. So interacting those and just making sure that one, yes, they need to know those, but as from the coaching perspective, are we having those follow-up conversations with them on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, so they know where they stand. They may not take that initiative to understand where they're at with their metrics, but if we're coaching and we're guiding and we're going through each accountability, I think that's a huge part of knowing that they are doing their part in the organization, or they need to make some changes or some improvements in their position.
Okay, fair enough. And Susie, when you talked about the having support, I'm assuming that also is based upon a lot of what Sarah's talking about here about making sure that out of the gate you have clear expectations, right? Or clear parameters, and really for that each person to understand what that role is. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think clear expectations, I think a focus, everyone is in their role because it's something that they are passionate about or an expert in, and allowing them to focus on what they're good at and what they're confident in will allow them to be more successful. So if you can set that expectation up, this is what your role is and what your goal in this role is, then they can have that clear line focus to go towards that. And then we can coach and train them based on what their, expected outcome is, versus kind of going between, spreading themselves thin between all these roles that they not really confident in.
Okay, Renee, yes, you're doing a lot of nodding. It seems to me that, if I'm going to overly simplify this in a kind of a corny fashion, right? When you think about things like engagement or morale, you think about sometimes, the cheerleading, the rah, rah, rah. And what I'm hearing here is that while that may be something we talk about later in this hour, I mean, at the moment, it's really first and foremost about connecting every team member to their job. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And that isn't the perfect, I think, first step. If you're following a progression of steps to solid employee engagement, that setting clear expectation and expectations and roles is key. And in addition, I think we can go even a step further and help tie that role and the tasks and the projects and everything related to that role to how it supports the big picture success of the organization and the mission.
And and once again, and I point this out a lot when we have discussions on our webinar programs, is that everything we're talking about right now too, let's realize there's not really a price tag that goes with it. We've yet to say, oh, you got to have this tool or that tool. What the three of you are talking about here is just really as they say in the football analogy, blocking and tackling. It's like the basics. And I love that Ray said this first step is this. So everything builds from here. So if the first big takeaway, and Renee, I'll stick with you at the moment, is just that, right? So you're just saying, make sure that you've got all of your, I guess you could say, even from down to job descriptions and the whole bit. I mean, is all of that included in this first step in your mind?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the job descriptions, because it really does have to start in the hiring process, right? That clear expectations piece. We want to make sure that the person sitting across from us in that interview has a very clear picture of what will be expected, given that everything is subject to change to some degree. But it really is key that we're bringing somebody in that understands the role and even the nature of the possibility of how much change might be involved. But it's, and including, and I don't mean to get hung up on this mission and vision piece, but Sarah mentioned it earlier on. Having that conversation in the interview process, making sure that the expectation that they are supporting the mission and vision of the organization, that's every bit as important to the success in their role as any sort of skill set or task related to it.
And Susie, since a big part of your focus is on the recruiting side, would you like to add anything more about how this is built from the actual interview hiring process, that onboarding, but it really starts that early?
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to add to that is that if you don't set the proper expectations in the interview process, I mean, your new hires, the key factor or one of the main things to people being dissatisfied in their job is not understanding the role. And so when you bring someone in, you really have to talk about, hey, let's understand what we're hiring you for, what your role is, what your day-to-day is. Here are the expectations. Here are what we don't expect of you. And so that conversation in the recruiting, and you started in the first call and then going through all of your steps, you have to reinforce it, right? You can't just lay out the expectations one time on an intro call. It has to be part of what's woven through everything and then into your training so that they fully, when they get to the sales floor or the customer service role or whatever role they're in, they fully understand, hey, this is what's expected of me. And they're excited about that because that's the role that they wanted, because that's what was given to them at the forefront of the conversation.
And Sarah, before we jump off this, and by the way, this is a great start. I think we've really laid a good foundation here. But you talked about connecting, also making sure they understand the vision and mission. So it sounds to me like you really have to make sure that that's pretty clear, because and what it really means. Because some entities have visions or missions that seem very very high level and but they might not have that meaning. So what do you do to make sure that people understand that when they come to to work in Home Trends?
I mean, we sprinkle it in all of our recruiting, our websites, our conversations with them, but we do have a way to, obviously track and measure where we're at with our mission. And that's, like I said, to serve those families. And so we've got actually signage in our stores for all of our employees and our customers to see what we're doing. And I mean, it's ways that they can impact through our employees that we hire and their families and our customers. And even we actually track, this is maybe getting off topic, but we actually track our volunteer hours and our blood donations and any ways, or our donations, any ways that we can make an exceptional impact. A lot of that's community, but it's also internal with our employees and our customers. So I think purpose is another word that we could use to describe that. Like, what is the purpose? And our company is bringing forth that purpose with employees, customers, and our community, which is really the way that the hierarchy of how we operate too.
100%. And I don't think that's getting off topic. I mean, Renee, to me, that gets back to what you're talking about. What Sarah's really saying here is that this is making all of this a part of the culture.
Absolutely. I mean, your core values, your mission, your vision are the foundation of your culture, hopefully your highly functioning culture, right? So I think it's key. And in addition to that, I think we have to be very mindful of not just the activities, which are really key. And I love hearing stories of organizations like Sarah's that operate that way and incorporate the community into their success. But the modeling of those values, if you've got 5 core values posted on your walls and in your literature and on your website, your team members need to see everyone in that organization, particularly leadership, modeling those values and using those values as guideposts.
Yeah. And it's funny.
100%.
Yeah. And it's interesting because as I hear the three of you talk about that, this is not accidental. Boy, you're talking about top down, you're talking about every day. This can't just be one of those things where you're like going, oh, let's see, it's the 12th of the month and we need to be thinking about employee engagement today or something along those lines. I mean, that's the one thing that I'm hearing from all of you. Let me ask, and Susie, I'm going to ask you this one because you brought the word up when you said support. You have to support. So we'll take it at face value and say, okay, we understand what sort of this foundational piece, this first step of everybody understanding their roles, et cetera. But now we overlay those to the real world. And we know that the last 3 years have been just insane. They've been crazy, right? There's always something disruptive coming up. So, all these best laid plans are great until they hit the real world. And now you've got some complicating factors that come from the outside you got to figure out. So what are the best ways to support your team members so that, you're keeping them feeling positive about what they're doing?
Sure. I think the best way to support them is to give them training and knowledge, right? Because the only way they can be successful in their job is if they have the tools, the knowledge, the information to meet their goals and their metrics. And so we're really big on our training, and it's not just training of your new hires, right? It's continual training. It's making sure that they know that I'm invested in your success, and the best way for you to be successful is to be confident, and you're confident with your knowledge. And so when I say support, it means let's give you the training. Let's make sure that we can give you the tools you need to be confident in what you're doing, which will then lead for you to be more successful, which leads to, enjoyment of your job.
Fair. And I guess, Sarah, I'm going to want to have you do a little bit of a deeper dive on that too. Not to point up the negative, but it's just as part of doing business is also all of that, the clear expectations, and then really supporting everybody to make sure that they've got the tools. Is that also the way that you can discover those that are just not a fit, that those members of the team that aren't quite in step? I mean, let's get real. Not these systems don't turn everybody into employees that are all gung-ho and ready to go. Some people, it might be the other way. Is that part of this as well? Do you want to be mindful of not just assuming that if you continue to put all this focus that you're going to have zero turnover and your retention numbers are going to be fantastic?
Right. I mean, of course, that's a whole discovery process with an employee that has some opportunities. And I think that just comes from the HR side of documentation. And are they not showing up to work? Or are they not catching on to the sales process or the operational processes? And of course, how many times have we coached them and talked to them about it? And unfortunately, yeah, there are going to be some of those employees, and we may just have to, make a decision to end the process with them in our company and try to hire better next time. So I think that's something too,
I think it's an important point. And Renee, jump in from the standpoint of, I'm not trying to be negative here, but at the same respect, I think what I'm saying is that you as a leader of your company in these areas, to be mindful of all of this, not to just assume that because you have this that there aren't going to be those moments or those situations that you have to manage and deal with.
No, certainly. That's, as you mentioned, part of the reality of doing business and running a business. I think, in order to expect engagement, we have to be engaged. And so when we're clarifying roles and we're providing that support, whether it's tools or resources, and we really have taken the time to know our team members, or whoever is coaching them really knows those team members, then we know sooner rather than later if they're not a fit. We can make those adjustments. Maybe they're better back of the house than front of the house, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to move out, but it might. And again, the more we are engaged and take the time to get to know them, we can see when it's not a fit before it starts to cause bigger problems in the organization.
100%, because I know that you focus a lot on retention, et cetera, and that's really a big, huge part of this. But I just, I like to mix that in, because I think what I'm saying is just don't be so blinded by the fact that because you have this type of program that all is well. Still notice what's going on. Not that you're going to necessarily exit somebody, but just at least knowing where people are struggling and having, it's not a one size fits all kind of a thing. Sarah, I wanted to ask you this because you brought up something I think is also really important when it comes to this particular area. And I think it was really revolving to me. The word I wrote down was transparency. This is when you talked about meeting goals and things of this sort. And we know that we've had some tremendous examples of many of our members that really are transparent with their KPIs and everything as a way of making sure employees understand expectations and are part of that. Can you talk a little bit about transparency and the importance of that as a tool in this, this element of really, managing your team and trying to keep them, positive and moving forward?
Well, I think it just comes down to one thing, and that's keeping score, giving them the goals that they may have for the month or the week or even the year, and making sure themselves and their teams even know what the score is. And if they're not, meeting those expectations or close to where they need to be, then it's coaching and guiding and developing, and just really trying to find out maybe too if they're struggling or have any opportunities. There could be outside things from not just internally at work that are going on, and just trying to, like I said, discovering maybe something that could be retracting them from meeting those expectations, and trying to help them, or providing empathy, I guess, towards that, and trying to find a way to help get them back on track.
But even those that are on track, I mean, I didn't mean to make that sound like it's only for those that are not on track. But this transparency piece seems to be that's a word that I'm kind of feeling like is cutting through all we're talking about. I think I hear you saying that's just such a critical piece of this whole thing, is everybody really not just understanding their role, but how they fit into the big picture. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. You mean as far as what part they're playing in the mission and the
Sure.
vision, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
All of the above. Yeah. Because I kind of feel like that was a thread through all you're talking about. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is how important that is for any business owner to make sure that they're, they're not holding all their cards, close to their chest, that they're actually sharing that with the team, and that's a way of really engaging.
Yeah, we do. We're celebrating all of our wins when it comes to community involvement and, volunteer hours specifically. We are tracking like I mentioned, if I'm volunteering, like for the Red Cross, for example, I know that I've put in 30 hours this last 2 months in the Red Cross, and everybody in my team knows that. And just, other, photography, for taking pictures and putting them on social media, and just, making sure you're celebrating those big things that you're doing towards your company vision and mission, and what you're doing to make that impact.
And I think that transparency creates trust with your employees, right? So if you talk about what's going on, and right now, obviously there's economic downturn, there's slower traffic, you can ignore it and pretend like it's not there, or you can talk about it and say, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. What can we focus on? What can you specifically focus on that you have control over that can increase your success? And so by acknowledging it and talking about it, you're creating trust with your team. And that trust then forms, that bond to get you guys to go, hey, we're in this together, and we're gonna push forwards together in our unique roles.
And I guess that's interesting when you talked about that, because is this, and Renee, I'll kick this over to you on this one, is this something we also want to make clear, that there are elements of this that are employee to employee, team member to team member, not just hierarchically from the top down?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate Susie's mention of trust, because that's where any sort of relationship building starts, right? So we have to have that trust between employees. We have to have that trust from employee to supervisor, manager, organizational leadership. And it's really critical if we're able, I call it kind of reasonable transparency. I couldn't agree more with Susie that, if there's something going on in the region or the economy in general, that's a conversation. It shouldn't be something that is held, in a small circle of higher level leadership. It should be a conversation, and employees should feel comfortable and have the psychological safety to have those conversations among each other in a constructive way, and get support from one another, having those conversations as well. And I think another aspect of transparency that sometimes gets overlooked is simply circling back to share, if we ask somebody to contribute in a certain way and there's a result that comes about because of those contributions, sharing that result with them. Maybe it worked spectacularly, maybe it missed the mark, but that's a conversation I think that could be had in a learning and growing capacity.
So, and the trust piece, I think is great. And you talked about, I know that Sarah talked about, some of the celebrating some of the things in the community, et cetera, and things like that. So what are the, there's always a desire for what are some of the, little things that people can take away and do in their own businesses. Susie, I'm gonna start with you. Are there special things also you can do beyond these structural things that are really tremendous for employee engagement, maybe along the lines of those community things and perhaps even those coming from the team member themselves? But what are some of those things that you've had success at, or that you could give us some idea on?
Sure. I mean, our success has been a lot in just acknowledgement and personal acknowledgement, where you're if you see them, you're in their store, you recognize them, you bring up a specific instance. Hey, I recognize that, and I saw that you did a good job there, and I was really impressed, right? Everybody works off ego, and ego contributes so much to your employees' happiness in their job. I think, they feel good, they feel recognized, they're going to go. So acknowledgement there. But then I also think global acknowledgement. So recognizing successes in front of the whole team or the whole company. We do a lot of utilize our email distribution lists where we're recognizing the delivery team to the sales team. And that gets them really excited because they feel good about knowing that their customers in good hands based on the delivery success. And then also just, relationship building is going to be the key. I mean, I think you have to know who your people are, what makes them tick, because one person's acknowledgement of one person, they might really like the personal acknowledgement, or they might like being called out in front of everyone. Somebody might like being on your social media and getting an employee spotlight, but that might not be important to someone else. And so you have to have the relationship with each individual in your company to understand what's going to be success, create success for them.
Yeah, you don't want to unintentionally embarrass somebody that just is not. Yeah, oh man, we've all been there, haven't we? We've seen those examples. Oh man, you kind of gave me chills. Sarah, let's continue on this pathway though. What do you all do? You did mention that you celebrate wins, things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the ways that you utilize, whether it be recognition, acknowledgement, things like that you found to be very successful?
Yeah, our owner does a weekly shout out every week, and it's more like a newsletter, and we give all of our employees the opportunity to recognize anybody in the company. So you'll see a lot of good feedback coming from that on recognition, maybe a delivery driver to a sales associate, or a sales associate to a delivery driver, and really focusing in, we try to get them to tie it to a core value. So again, that's fitting back into how we're impacting the culture. And celebrating our culture. And then we even do birthdays and anniversaries, shout outs on email, sometimes on social media, just to really collaborate between our locations and create some celebration with those events. And trying to think, just milestones of sales or delivery numbers as well, just shouting out those successes and different things throughout the organization.
Renee, what are some of the best practices you've seen in those areas?
One of the tools I found that I think is, well, let me back up. First of all, I can't echo strongly enough how much I believe the celebration and the recognition, how aspects are, how important they truly are, what a difference they ultimately make. I mean, research will show that people will leave a job because they don't feel appreciated much more frequently than benefits or pay or whatever, all of those market related issues or conditions. However, I think we have to be mindful to celebrate not just the finished, and Sarah really touched on this, milestones, right? Not just the finished product, but progress along the way. We reached this milestone, we've reached this milestone, because those celebrations, however small or large they might be, can often be what get us through something challenging as a team, as an individual. And to the discussion on larger discussion on how people like to be recognized, plug, I promise I'm not getting kickbacks for a tool that's out there. You've probably all heard of the 5 love languages.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And that author and another author teamed up to write a book on the 5 workplace appreciation languages. And you don't even have to buy the book. You can go online and find the quiz, but it's, all the panelists have mentioned the importance of really knowing your employee, engaging with them and getting to know, I think Sarah used the term discovery, and really, understanding who they are and how they like to be recognized is a really important part of that. And, it's a great team building activity too, to just have everybody take that quiz and have some discussion in around it.
Very cool. Well, appreciate
Yeah.
that. No, that's a great takeaway. Let me ask this. I'm gonna do a toss up here. We'll see who wants to jump in on this one. With that, all of that said, how do you ensure that it's not gimmicky? We've all been there. We've all been, I've been in places I've been employed at where there's been attempts to do things, recognition, and it just falls flat. It seems gimmicky. How do you avoid that? I'll throw that out to anybody that wants to jump in.
I think it has to be specific. You've got to tie it to a specific thing that they accomplished or that you saw them doing on the sales floor that maybe no one else saw them doing. But hey, and shout out to Sarah for that, for the customer service she provided. We also really push our customers to give us Google reviews. And so we also not every single one will celebrate, but some of the real impactful messages from our customers, we make sure that those are visible to all of our employees. So we'll send those out as well, just to show the service that has been provided, whether it's a delivery driver getting one or a sales or a customer service representative.
So it's the word I'm just going to throw on that is it's got to be authentic, right? If you're recognizing something, it's got to be authentic, not seeming like it's manufactured or gamey or gimmicky. Susie, Renee, any additions to that?
I mean, I think along that same line, it has to be personalized, right? So if every Monday you're sending an email that says highlights the same, metric, right? We're talking about top salesperson or top this, it's not personalized to that person's success, so you want to make sure that you're calling out something, as Sarah said, more specific or more personalized to a category that someone's passionate about. Or don't only think about, sales numbers are great to recognize, but hey, I saw you assist a customer on this, or I saw you assist a colleague, and shout out the things that aren't necessarily metric based, but just a good team member based. So personalize it more so than being just a generic blast.
Okay.
And I would agree that it doesn't have to be a big over the top celebration or recognition, proportionate to whatever the accomplishment or the milestone is. But that in the moment feedback is really valuable. One, it demonstrates that you are engaged enough to recognize something that you want to celebrate or to call out and commend that person on. I also really appreciate the discussion that the other panelists have mentioned about different departments and different teams interacting with each other in that vein of recognition. And that I think is really, really powerful and breaks down a lot of barriers and goes a long way toward building those relationships.
And I want to dig down on that a little bit more in just a second, but there's been a couple of great questions that have come through. And we talked a little bit about this, but let's dig in a little bit more. And that is, we talked about, celebrating these positive things, et cetera. But, we know that it's been rough, right? We know that there's been traffic's down and it's been a struggle at times, sales have been up, sales have been down, et cetera. So, how do you make sure that you can boost people up and keep them up and positive when the environment around them might not be all the time? And I'll throw that one out there to anybody who wants to jump in.
I think, again, that goes to the transparency, is acknowledging that is happening, and then focus on a specific success, right? So you may not have someone that met their written sales goal, but they had a really great average sale in mattress department, which led to, they had got protection on it or a spiff on it. Focus on something that you can highlight that then says, hey, look what we still can do, or how can you improve your specific situation? What do you have control over? So I think it's about acknowledging, being transparent with, yes, we're in an economic downturn, but in this situation, you were very successful, and how can we take that success to the next customer that walks through the door?
I think it has a lot to do too with your surroundings. One of our core values is being positive and optimistic. A lot of us in our organization, especially in leadership, do a great job of sharing, hey, maybe here's a great podcast to listen to, or, every day is a new day. And in our sales process, we call it's showtime. So, you're coming in and trying to lift everybody up. If it was maybe a tough day in sales the day before, or something happened the day before, really just trying, as far as coming in with a positive mindset, and trying to do in our, I guess I didn't mention this and that, but in our morning huddles, we call them, we'll do a brain food session is what we call it, where we're not talking about the business, but we're listening to like a Zig Ziglar, some type of motivation to get the day started.
And Sarah, one thing that you said, and you've alluded to it like twice, that I really appreciate is I think also I just feel like there's a lot of authenticity in what you're talking about, and I think that a leader bringing something like that in, and not just bringing it in to say, hey, I want to, no times are tough, but talking about how it's important to them it is too. Just that, how far that goes, and please, anybody jump in and with a comment on it. But for me, I think there's so much power in somebody that says, man, this has been a rough week, and I know that I need fuel. And that fuel is, whether it's, it's a podcast, something like this, to say, I want to share something because, man, it helped me get through it. That authenticity of them understanding that you're not just a leader, you're human. How critical is that? Just being real. Renee, what do you, I'll let you, I will point you out on that one, because I'm just really curious your thoughts on that.
It's interesting. This question and conversation in and around vulnerability has been coming up a lot in my world lately. And it's tricky. It is, because you do want to be transparent, but yet you still have to lead in a way that inspires confidence. And so it's a delicate balance. So I think you just have to be very thoughtful and intentional about the conversations you can have, and really invest in those. And then when there are different aspects of what's going on in maybe the organization that you can't share, or wouldn't be appropriate to share, that's okay too. That's part of running a business. But I think just knowing what it is, what you can, get into in detail and involve them, even to the point of asking for suggestions, or asking them to help brainstorm a solution to a problem that the organization is having. And then and then also just making sure they don't think it was you weren't just asking for lip service, that there's some follow through. Like I said, even if it ends up falling flat or isn't the appropriate direction, getting back to them and letting know that their contribution was appreciated.
Susie, I'd love to get your thoughts too, because it is a tightrope, right? You want to be real and authentic, but you want to be a leader, and you don't want people to think that, you're that you don't have things in control, etc. It is a little bit of a tightrope.
Yeah, and I think, that's part of being the leader. As a leader has to lead by example. And so you have to come in and be transparent. Hey, it's not the best time that it is, but I'm going to come to work and I'm going to be motivated every day, and I'm going to be engaged and positive, and I'm going to, work with you to give you the training. Let's focus on something that's important to us. And I think, what Renee said is giving them feedback. I found a lot of success in letting your people lead, right? What's something they're passionate in, and let them create a training program, or let them take on something. And that gives them pride in what they're doing. That gives them excitement. They can be a leader, and utilize your veterans for that, right? Your veterans that have been there, say, hey, I know you're really focused on solid wood products, and can you lead us in something on that? And let them create and lead, because that gives them excitement about their job. And then, it breeds kind of that, it's not always the managers that have to be the ones training and investing. It's your fellow colleagues too.
We talked a little bit of that earlier about that kind of that employee to employee part, right? Team member to team member. There's something to be said there. I want to get back to something that Renee touched on, and I just kind of put a little sidebar and kind of got us away from it. I want to get back to it. Sarah, I'll start with you on this one. Are there different challenges in your mind, department to department, front of house, back of house, et cetera, when it comes to engagement? Because I would think it's a little bit different sometimes when your salespeople are going to be somewhat captive on the floor in front of you, but when you've got delivery people out and things of that sort. Can you talk a little bit about this subject matter today, engagement, morale, et cetera, when it comes to the differentiation between the different departments?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely a difference in the level of, I'd say, like, participation and that recognition from department to department. Of course, your delivery team is on the road, or they're hands-on in the warehouse for a majority of the day, and they're not really engaged on their computer like our salespeople. If they're not with a customer, they can be at their desk or on the phone or providing that. So we definitely encourage them to take just carving out some time to help make sure they're staying engaged and involved in what's going on in the business, because a lot of it does come through that level of communication via email. Of course, we have meetings in both locations and trying to get them on the same page. But most recently, I just want to quick talk about something we do on a quarterly basis. Our leadership team goes off site and develops our key priorities for the quarter. And from that, we take a theme that we like to input into our organization. And so it's going to really revolve around the theme of what our priorities are, so we can engage our entire company. In this last quarter 2, we had a really successful rollout with a theme that we actually created teams between our whole organization. We're a small organization, 50 employees. And so all of we did kind of like a fantasy draft, you should say. And we had distribution members intertwined with sales members, and we did like a point challenge on just different key parts of the business. And we really got some good motivation and participation with our team. So coming up with fun theme challenges, whether it's just within the building or within the different business units, I think is an important way to maybe create some more engagement and recognition between the company and help them to get to know about each other's operations.
And before we go further in that, I mean, you bring up another great point there too, and that quarterly gathering, you're also talking about building that engagement or morale within your leadership team, right? If you're tasked to come together and think about what is that theme for the quarter, you are building that in that group as well. It's not just always flowing down, right? I mean, it's sometimes you got to make sure that they're fueled up as well. Is that a byproduct that you've seen?
Right. We come up with our priorities, and then we figure out a way to cascade that communication so we can get our whole team bought into what we're trying to accomplish. What is the most important things that we need to complete in the next 3 months?
Cascade that communication.
Sounds easy, doesn't it?
I'm using it though. I love alliteration, and you've just hit one of my buttons. So thank you very much for that. So that's awesome. Susie, let me ask you the question that we were kind of leading into there. Can you talk a little bit about also department to department as far as in your world too, and some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think how we've kind of worked to get departments to be aligned together is to engage. We do a lot of sales training where we have meetings where everyone's on a call or Zoom or anything like that. And so we bring different departments into our sales training where they can talk about their role and what they're doing and how the sales team affects what they're doing, and the positives, the negatives, and tips and tools, and coming from that specific person, coming from our router or coming from our delivery lead or our warehouse, our prep team. It really helps kind of fully understand versus coming from a leader. You know, if I tell them, hey, this is what the delivery team's doing, it doesn't sit as well as if a delivery guy is on there saying, hey, this is what I'm experiencing in the home. And these are the things that you guys can do to help us be more successful in your role. And so that's really created a bond. I think to Sarah's point, we've had some cross store, we have multiple locations, so cross store competitions as well, that kind of help, you know, breed some excitement and get to know each other. You come up with team names, you get, you know, points or recognition based on things. And then there's a final prize that different members of different stores would win together. So those types of things help to just kind of bring the teams together and understand each other's roles. If you understand how your role impacts someone else's role, you guys can work better together.
Renee, you talked a lot about the department differences as well. Would you like to weigh in a little bit on that? Because I think that's a challenge for everybody that's listening today.
Sure. You know, I think, first of all, the creativity that Sarah mentioned, how they infuse in, whether it's celebrations or recognition or just overall involvement of the different teams, and, you know, just taking the time to figure out how can we not leave this team, this department out of this activity or this initiative, and making sure that everyone is feeling wholly included in whatever the organization, even if their role is technically smaller. Got to figure out a way to make them feel like they're you know, a significant part of it. And I get side eye when I mention this, but I think an opportunity in addition for, and I think you cover a lot of ground when you're in a huddle and you're sharing that. I think that's really huge for employees to be able to recognize the different department contributions. But if they have an opportunity to either get to know them on a personal level, so if there's some sort of opportunity for them to socialize as people, not necessarily even employees, you know, it's really hard to be mad at this person when you realize, you know, your kids go to the same school and they have some of the same challenges day to day that you do. And this is where I get the side eye, is when I suggest the possibility of shadowing, right? Having somebody from the sales floor shadow somebody in delivery. I realize there are liability and logistics issues there, but if we can use some of that creativity that the panelists have mentioned to put some of those things in place and get that in-depth understanding of a different team or a different department's reality, I think that can be really powerful.
Sarah and Susie, have you guys done any of that, just out of curiosity?
We've incorporated it into our new hire training, where they, you know, we call it kind of a tour to Crowley. So you're going to all of our different locations. We've had new hires go out on trucks to see what that feels like, to sit in on the warehouse where you're doing your daily prep, to sit with our ordering department for a few hours, see what that looks like and what that entails. And I think, you know, you understand the whole, you know, every cog of the wheel, you understand the whole wheel when you understand the different things, and you can see where your role fits in. So, and it also just builds, as you said, relationships. I mean, relationships are key to anything, and key to employees' enjoyment of what they're doing, right? If you enjoy the people you work with and you build a relationship, then you're going to want to come back to work. And so building that relationship between departments is really important, and starting that early on is good. So when you hear the name Kirk, you know who that person is. You put a face to a name because you met with them.
No, I love that. I mean, for Crowley to do that, I mean, it's interesting because you're right. You're committing to that right out of the gates, right? So you're trying to create that understanding department to department right out of the gates. It's pretty cool. Sarah, any thoughts about that, or is it anything that you guys have thought about with a little bit of role playing or role reversal?
Over the last couple of years, we've developed, we call it our Leadership Academy, and so these are members of our team that have expressed interest in learning more about the company and potentially growing. And we have been introducing them to really just topics that impact the business. So we've got a whole group of people that our topic that whole day or that half a day might be the distribution center. So we've all came to the distribution center and gone through different stations and learned about the impact of the company. And then we've had ones like on financials and budgeting. How much money does your sale actually make the company? So thinking about that from that standpoint. And then also I've trained them on human resources and recruiting and those topics. And then we've done retail sales and advertising and marketing. And so giving those people that are actually interested in wanting to learn more about the business that opportunity. And we have them go. We've trialed and errored a couple of different situations. We used to do it monthly. Now we do it bi-monthly and all in person. Sometimes it was remote, but we just feel like it's more impactful when it's in person. And we also sprinkle in, leadership topics, or topics like personal accountability or your mindset, topics like that, to help you become just a better person and grow and develop.
I think through this conversation today, I think that everybody that's listening in understands why we wanted to have Susie and Sarah here from Crowley and from Home Trends, because of the fact that it's so clear that this is not 5% of the job you guys are doing, that this is such a huge chunk of everything that you do. And Renee, I'm saying that to set you up here as, from your company, is to talk just about the fact that letting everybody really understand that you've got to commit to this. This is time. This is a major investment in order to really create that environment, whether you want to call it culture, the engagement, the morale, all of the above. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that anybody that thinks they can just sort of tiptoe in and out of this, then they're kidding themselves.
Oh, absolutely. It is a commitment, and it never stops. and that's okay, right? It would be, part of what we all look to, and particularly not just in leadership, but our team members, is growth. So it's an opportunity for us to, look at continuous quality improvement. It is a commitment. I think it's, worth mentioning that, increasing levels of employee engagement isn't just about the warm and fuzzy, right? There's a business case behind it all. I think statistically, higher organizations with higher engaged employees have a 20% greater amount of sales. They have 21% greater profitability. So but it doesn't happen unless you commit to it, and you have to structure it. We can talk about this all day long, but if we don't, and I can hear from both of these panelists that they have systems in place to make sure that this is ongoing work. But that's really key. What structures and systems can we put in place to make sure that this is happening consistently, that it doesn't come off as some sort of flavor of the month type of thing, and then it loses steam. So, building in systems and getting the right people involved. I really appreciated the comment about the Leadership Academy, because what a great way to retain a top performer, to give them an opportunity for something like that. So just having those systems in place and being fully committed to the fact that you're never done, and recognizing that is kind of a good thing. What new, cool, inspirational opportunity might come about as a result of this ongoing work.
Yeah, and I'm like a broken record. I mention this every time we talk about anything relating to team members, is that we all know that this investment does pay off in dollars as well, because we know it's much more expensive to replace than to retain. And this is everything we're talking about here is all about retention, right? Because that's, creating that environment. Yes, it helps you recruit. There's no doubt about it, but this is really such a linchpin for the retention part of it. I think that one thing I'd like to do, and I don't often do this on these webinars, but I want to ask Susie and Sarah, I'd like to ask each of you to, in some ways, it's almost like talking directly to the people that are either watching this now or getting it on demand. So what would you say, and Sarah, I'll start with you, if you're sitting across the table from a fellow professional in this exact end of their retail company, what would you tell them are just the keys, the things that they pay the most attention to? Because we've really kind of given them so many things today, but what would you say if you're sitting across the table and somebody's like going, Sarah, what would you suggest that I do and really focus on?
I mean, this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but it's, definitely important, and it sounds easy, I guess, but your consistency. Like, is this something that you do just a couple days out of the week, or is this something you consistently do over the time frame of everything that you've been doing? I mean, I've been with the company for 2 years now, and I will tell you, we have focused on the vision, the mission, the core values, and making sure that we're connecting and building trust with our employees every single day. It's just that important, I think. I kind of want to slide in one more nugget here, and Renee, and I don't mean to take your time, Susie, but we also measure our employee engagement. So we can talk about, we feel like we've got a high, are your employees engaged? Well, there are surveys and different ways that you can measure that. And we've done several surveys, from best places to work to our own created Gallup Q12 surveys, or where we can measure our employee net promoter score. And I think that's very important for you to understand where that is too, because that's your employees giving you that feedback anonymously, and you can really gauge the health of the company at that point too. So if you're not doing that, that is very important, I feel like, so you know exactly how they're feeling.
You can always throw in extra nuggets on this program. You always have carte blanche on that. And remember, you can't manage what you can't measure. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about having some measurements there. So Susie, what are the things that you would say to that person across the table? And by the way, that was not cheesy, Sarah. What you said was just, I thought was just spot on. But Susie, what would you say to somebody, a fellow professional from another retailer sitting across from you right now?
Yeah, I think is to focus on the little acknowledgements matter. And I mean, I cannot understate or overstate the relationship with your employees is what keeps them coming back. So do you care about them, and do you ask them questions about their family? And not when you walk in the door, are you focused on, getting straight to your work? Or are you focused on saying hello and asking them how their day was, asking how their kid was, what the baseball game was, when they go on vacation, respect their time, and then be interested in what they did when they come back? Because acknowledging who they are as an individual is going to give them the desire to work with you and to grow with you. So I mean, I've heard that so many times from our employees. When a leader does acknowledge them, it means so much. When a leader doesn't acknowledge them, it makes a bigger impact. And so just that daily recognition, daily acknowledgement of who your staff is as a person is going to keep them coming back for your business.
Well, all right, Renee, I'm going to give you the last word on this whole thing. How would you like to wrap that up?
No, those are really incredible points. I think both holding true to the mission and your core values, and being very invested in building that solid culture, as well as the focus on relationships that Susie mentioned, and that relationship and trust building aspect. And then I would just add to that, and both of these panelists demonstrated it in several ways, their commitment to ongoing learning and growth, and providing those growth opportunities so that employees feel challenged and supported in that way as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to make mention, we mentioned at the top of this program that for those of you that are part of the Synchrony Ignite program, which is a way to help motivate a lot of folks, for, of course, participating today and being a part of this, you get a chance to get a few extra points and stuff. And I think we're working there to put up your code. I know, Caprice, you're trying to share the screen and I don't see anything specifically. Can you, do you have that code that we can at least make mention of? Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Fabulous. It's up. The challenge code is BOOST 623. You get 2,500 points. That is fantastic. All right. Well, there we go. So there's that. So thank you for that, for all of you taking part in that. We appreciate it. We thank our friends at Synchrony. And then also, of course, as always, we have tremendous resources. go.myhfa.org/HR. And we have a ton of wonderful, just whether it's content, whether it's program suggestions, whatever, there's just a ton there for you to enjoy and to take and use, and hopefully to help your business. So we had a great, man, this hour just went like that. I really appreciate what a great panel we had. I want to thank Renee Johnson with Employee Engagement Solutions. Thank you, Renee, for being here. Susie Brummel with Crowley Furniture and Mattress. Great to have you as well. And Sarah Luther from Home Trends. Once again, just think there was so many great takeaways today, and we just really appreciate it. And of course, I always end our programs with two things. I want to wish everybody tremendous sales and good health. For all of us here at HFA, I'm Mark Schumacher. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.